Hey everybody, welcome back. Today we're picking up again with our 20 for 20 series. Today we're looking at Alabama's secondary and one guy in particular, Patrick Surtain. I think Tony and I agree that he's probably going to be the best guy in the secondary next year, but where is he going to play? That's the question everybody wants to know. Tony, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well. Doing pretty well.
We're just chugging along. Still got nothing to really do, nowhere to go. Where do you think Surtain is going to line up next year? I know that this is something that the fans are having a lot of fun talking about, and that we've talked about it, just amongst ourselves.
Yeah, so I think this is probably one of the biggest questions in the secondary, and I think when you look at the not just the secondary, sorry, the whole defense. I think when you look at this is the first real step you have to take when piecing together how Alabama is going to look. There's a lot of ways you can go with this. I think the best way is to move Surtain into the star position out of the nickel formation, and then out of base probably play him at regular outside corner where he's played. But most of the time, Alabama is running things out of the nickel formation, so that's kind of what when we're talking about this, we're talking nickel. So I would play Patrick Surtain at the star position. It's a spot where Alabama's tried to use him before. As a freshman, maybe it was kind of too complicated for him to pick up right away. And then last year, they had Shaheem, a veteran at that spot. Alabama likes to put a veteran guy at that position. And right now, if you look at this secondary, they're losing 4 out of their 5 starters out of the nickel formation. So you really need a veteran's presence at that position, or at least Alabama has needed a veteran presence at that position. So to me, it just all screams Patrick Surtain moving inside to star. He's able to move and keep up with those slot receivers, and then he's also big enough to kind of go against maybe a tight end or the bigger players he'd be going up against as well there. So I think he's definitely able to play that. I think from a knowledge standpoint, he's also able. So all that together, just really to me, it makes the most sense.
Yeah, and just to be clear, when Tony says the star position, that's really just another name for the nickel cornerback, right, Tony?
Right. Yeah. The fifth defensive back out of a 5 defensive back set.
So I assume that you're arguing that Alabama doesn't normally drop down to just 4 DBs, but when they did, Surtain would go back outside.
Yeah, I mean he's really been established at that outside cornerback position. So I think it would just make sense. Obviously, you're going to have him on the field, right? So I think out of a base formation, he would play outside cornerback.
So great. Just wanted to clarify. I think that Tony's made a great point about where Surtain should play in a normal year. But with all of us being locked down, Alabama lost spring practice. I think that, and we've talked about this in some of our previous videos, I think Alabama is going to want to simplify things for these younger guys as much as possible. I don't know that Alabama is going to want guys have it, because obviously Surtain can probably handle it. I'm sure that he can play the star and still be a great outside corner. But with those safeties and those other guys that are trying to communicate, not just dealing with, okay, this guy's going to rotate back outside and the other guy's going to leave the field. Who am I looking at? I think it's best to just keep things simple if we're talking about maybe Alabama doesn't get these practices back. So for that reason alone, I would leave Surtain outside. Which is where I think that he's proven that he excels. You also don't have to ask him to learn a new position. And I think you let the other guys, you kind of fill around him, just because then the guy who's going to play the star, that's all he's going to do. You don't have to worry about anyone shuffling or anyone just on the back end getting confused about where guys are. Does that make any sense to you, Tony, or you think that's not a big deal?
I think that Surtain would be able to learn the star. In fact, he's already has some experience at the star. I don't think that would be the case. But you do make an interesting point of if you have something that works, he's been such a a lockdown outside corner. Perhaps you'd want to keep him there and try someone else at star. Is there somebody at star that you would? So if you have Surtain at star or at outside corner, there's a couple of options. But what are you thinking for the star position if you elect to have Surtain on the outside?
So if I envision Alabama leaving Surtain outside and maybe playing JUCO transfer Ronald Williams inside. And we saw that, he did play the nickel cornerback some last year, and he had some success for that. So I kind of think he's a guy that already knows how to play that position a little bit. Obviously, he's going to have to learn Alabama's defense and the calls and everything. But, it's not like he's learning a completely new position. It's not like he's going to be unfamiliar with everything.
Yeah, I think he's a possibility. That's something that Nick Saban had mentioned. As he's a possibility of a guy that could really play anywhere in the kind of like Surtain, where he could play anywhere. And him being a JUCO player, it's going to be easier for him to maybe make that kind of switch or maybe have that kind of responsibility just because he's been at the college level for 2 years. Another player, if you wanted to kind of go from a younger standpoint, is Jalen Armour-Davis, who kind of worked as the backup at the star position last year. I was talking with Shaheem Carter for a story earlier, and I asked him, at star position, it's going to be tough to take over. Who do you think? And one of the names he mentioned as a possibility was Jalen Armour-Davis, just because he looked well. He looked like he was doing a good job at times in practice, and he's another guy with Alabama has a bunch of people with the size to play that position. It seems like Jalen Armour-Davis has some physicality to his game as well that could maybe help out at that spot. So I think if you're looking at the star position, I would go with Surtain, but then my other two options, like you said, I think would be Williams or Armour-Davis.
I think we both agreed that Josh Jobe is probably a favorite, at least right now, to land the other outside corner spot.
Yeah, and you know what? He's another guy that you could move in that star spot. I just think with Josh Jobe, I see him as an outside corner. I see him as a guy that I think he's a guy that needs to get some confidence to his game. I think he plays better when he's confident. I think he can – it's almost like – it seems like Josh Jobe's a guy that when he makes a mistake, or at least early on in his career, he's made a mistake and, he's let that affect him. And I think building, perhaps that would change, if they had a spring to work on stuff. And maybe it changes, as he matures in the defense. But I like him at the cornerback position. I liked what I saw from him in the Citrus Bowl at that spot. And maybe just let him excel at that position. He's definitely a physical guy. He could move to star maybe later in his season, but I really like him kind of developing on that outside and really progressing a lot in his game.
Yeah, I think that we kind of agree at the star position. You either want to train someone specifically for that spot, or you want to have maybe your most capable defensive back. And we agree that if Alabama is going to move somebody around, Josh Jobe just doesn't really fit that profile that Alabama's had in the past. Like, he doesn't remind you of Minkah Fitzpatrick or any of those other guys the same way that maybe Surtain does.
Well, just from a experience standpoint, I think as he grows into this defense, sure, maybe you would play him there. I mean, Minkah's an exceptional player from a knowledge standpoint. Another thing when I'm mentioning Pat Surtain as the star, he's a guy that grew up with football. His dad's a Pro Bowler. I mean, and so he knows all about the star position. He knows the complexities of defense. A lot of the star position is just being knowledgeable. I mean, look, Shaheem Carter had it last year, and he's probably the most knowledgeable player on the entire defense. So I think with Surtain, you got that perfect, I guess, mix of, physical ability to do it and then also knowledge and leadership. And so that's why I'd have my pick. I think with, a younger guy like Josh Jobe, he doesn't have all that yet. So not ruling it out for the future, but I like him outside.
Yeah, absolutely. You kind of touched on this a little bit, but I mean, just Surtain I know that from talking, we both think Surtain is in store for a special season and that he could kind of be the latest in this long line of just really great defensive backs that Saban's kind of brought along.
Yeah. And, he's such a special talent that, like we're mentioning Minkah, maybe you just plug and play Pat wherever you need him. Maybe it's, geez, we saw Minkah Fitzpatrick move everywhere from safety to nickelback to cornerback, so you could see the same thing with Pat if that's what they need him to do. It's really going to be how quickly this defense, matures. I mean, they're replacing, 4 starters. both their safeties. I've even heard, some fans, I don't necessarily agree with this, but some fans saying that, hey, move Pat Surtain to the safety role, alongside Jordan Battle. I don't necessarily agree with that, but that's another possibility. He's got the size to play safety if that's what you wanted to do. I don't see him as a safety. I see him as a more of a cornerback or out of that star role. But another possibility, and he could play it in a pinch if Alabama just was really struggling at safety as well. So I think when we normally later on in the summer we do our most important players of Alabama. Geez, Pat Surtain has to be in the top 5, maybe the top 3, maybe even in that top 2. I mean, it's a guy. You talk about guys, Alabama can't lose, and you knock on wood when you say that for them. But Pat Surtain's high up on that list.
Yeah, and I think for me, you mentioned the sort of speculation that Surtain could play safety. I think it's less about Surtain's ability to play safety with us, and probably just how we view, if you move him back, then you're asking a lot of inexperience at corner to play. And I think you want to, at least in my experience, you kind of want to minimize an experience at your 3 cornerback positions as much as possible.
And if you're looking at, just in terms of maybe who I feel the most comfortable in the secondary, I really like what I've seen from Jordan Battle. And so I don't necessarily think you need as much help in the back end of the secondary as maybe you would at the cornerback position.
Yeah.
That being said, that you still replacing 2 safeties at 2 starters at safety. And while we think, Jordan Battle is going to have a great year, he's still a new starter. So that's still a lot of responsibility for him. It's really tough because, when you look at the spring, this is the kind of the time when we would have been able to see all this. We would have been able to evaluate, okay, where do things stand in the secondary? You really can't do that. So it'll definitely be interesting to see how it all plays out.
Yeah, and more importantly, this is when Nick Saban gets the chance to see those guys play all these positions. I remember, I think one spring I saw in a given week, I think I saw 4 or 5 different guys play the nickel, the star position. So, I mean, early in spring, Saban will rotate those guys in and out and kind of till he figures out what lineup he wants.
Right, yeah, and they'll still be able to do that. I'm sure Alabama's going to experiment throughout the season. There's a lot of options. There's a lot of talent, a lot of guys that they can go through. Jaquez Robinson's a freshman that came in early, could provide depth. He got some length there too. So there's a lot of guys that you could see maybe plugging in different situations, just kind of seeing what sticks, but we're all going to have to kind of wait to see what that's going to look like.
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, we have to wait a little longer. We just want to thank y'all for tuning into these videos, and we like recording them. It gives us a sense of normalcy in this weird time, but we hope y'all like watching them. Hopefully we take your mind off just all the dead time you probably have right now. But anyway, we want to hear what you have to think. Do y'all think Surtain should stay at the outside corner spot, which is definitely the right call? Or do you think Tony's right and he should move to be the star? Or, like you said, there is speculation that he could play safety. Where do y'all think he lines up? Just comment. Let us know what you think. And let us know if not Surtain, who should play the star position? Who do y'all want to see there?
Awesome. Yeah, and make sure to like and subscribe to our station. We're going to be hitting you with a lot of these videos over the next coming days. So if you press the notifications, the little bell, you'll get notifications whenever we're on, and we look forward to talking.
Yeah. Tony, thanks for joining me today, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Okay, see you, man.